Hello everyone and welcome to Tosser Show, and today I'm gonna do a hot take about the Final Fantasy XVI demo. Overall, I'm super excited about the release of Final Fantasy XVI because it is one of a numbered game. It's been so long after Final Fantasy XV that we're waiting for this, and it's super exciting to see a new one is coming up. And this one is a little bit interesting because it's made by the team who developed Final Fantasy XIV, so I'm very curious about how they change the game depending on what they knew about what they did on Final Fantasy XIV, Realm Reborn and all those kind of stuff. And knowing that I'm a big fan of Final Fantasy franchise, I'm just super excited about what it will do to our favorite franchise. So now, does Final Fantasy XVI live to the expectation of a Final Fantasy franchise? Well, let's see what I think about at least this demo to give you an idea about whether I like it or not and whether you're gonna like it or not. To make this video, I decided to cut it into 4 big areas of things I will talk about. Number 1, we're gonna talk about the overall presentation. Number 2, we're gonna talk about the gameplay. Number 3, we're gonna talk about the story. And finally, we're gonna talk about playability. You may wonder, what's the difference between playability and gameplay? Well, gameplay, I want to go inside the battle system and all those inventory items that you may have, the menu and stuff like that. Whereas playability is more about the length. Is it a good length? And if you finish part of this demo, do you have something else popping up or not? That's what we're gonna talk about on playability. So now, let's have my hot take about Final Fantasy XVI demo. Let's start with the overall presentation. I'll say this, it is a beautiful game. It is, it basically is. I think the game shines like all Final Fantasy games up to now. Because Final Fantasy XIII, XIV, and XV are wonderfully beautiful. Even the 7 remake was wonderfully beautiful. Well, this does not disappoint. I really like the characters' 3D models. I think they're very well done and they really look like they did an effort into making sure that you can see the lips moving certain ways and all of that. I think the motion capture was thought about a lot on this game for sure. And I think overall I liked the ways that they designed those characters. I think they look pretty cool, although I would say that they're not that different from a Final Fantasy XII style of design when I think about it. So it is somewhat expected, not necessarily something that is completely new like you could have seen when we go from Final Fantasy VI to Final Fantasy VII or to Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy VIII. So that's something to remember. Alas, one thing that I was a bit disappointed on this demo is the lack of landscapes and variety of landscapes. So yes, the 3D models of the character are really well done, but when you look at all the decors, all the things that are surrounding you, surrounding your characters, it is kind of empty. I would say the only part that looks really cool is really when you're in the castle. Well, not necessarily the castle itself, but when you're in the Duchy of Rosaria. I think that's the Duchy of Rosaria. Anyway, you see the castle by itself showing up and the flowers and all those kind of stuff and a lot of people. And this is pretty cool. But when you're on the marsh, for example, it's pretty straightforward. When you're in the castles, like there's some dungeons that looks like the inside of some fortress and stuff like that, it is pretty empty too. And the beginning of the game where your character is running, that too is pretty straightforward. There's nothing really special so far. So I hope that the more you progress in the game, the more you see some things that are beautiful, kind of like a Xenoblade in a way, more than an empty style of landscape, but we'll see. So far it's not there yet, in my opinion, from a demo standpoint here. The UI interface of the game is well done. I think that it looks beautiful. I love how sometimes it flashes a little bit to show you that it's the beginning of a chapter, or that you have some of those words popping up to tell you where you are and things like that. I think it's cute. I think it's done well, and I think that it's visible, easy to read, and still classy. So I like that. You will see that on the game there's some cinematic action sometimes that you have to be careful about because you have to press R2 or you have to press square at certain moments within cutscenes. It's mostly during battles first, so it's okay. It's not necessarily when you have a time where you're just watching a normal cutscene that just have characters talking with each other, right? So far it seems okay there, but I just wanted to bring that up. There's also some moment where you can see that you can go up or you can go in between certain places, and they add a little set of 3 arrows to show you that you can go up or that you can break things or things like that. And when you open doors and things like that, you also have to press R2, and it plays obviously, because we're on PlayStation 5, it plays obviously with that system that you have on the DualSense that force the R2 button to be much more harder to press, so like that you kind of have a feeling about opening a door. The menus, when you look at the main menu, is pretty much well organized. I think that it's very normal for a Final Fantasy game to have a good menu. I think it's not that complicated to use, and I have the impression first that it kind of tried to be more like an Elder Scroll menu and stuff like that, like more trying to be in a more recent kind of eras of menus, but it's still well done. Overall, I don't have any complaint about that. And the tutorials are pretty straightforward. Every single tutorial in the game looks simple, straightforward, and it gives you the information that you need. So that's a good thing. Finally, let's talk about the music. I know that a lot of you are fans of Masayuki Soken, the one that did the music of Final Fantasy XIV, but for me, I'll say that the music is great but not memorable. So far, I do not remember about most of the music. It's not like a Yumatsu era kind of music where you were able to hum it super quickly. It's just coming to your mind. The terrace theme and all that. Here, I don't see that yet. And I know that on Final Fantasy XIV, I did have that issue as well from time to time. Although I'm pretty sure that I will like it. It's just that compared to most Final Fantasies, I don't know if it will go to the level that I wish it is, where, oh, I listened to the music once and I'm just in love with it. It kind of disappeared from the Final Fantasy franchise, by the way. I think that Final Fantasy XIII is not as good, for example, as Final Fantasy IX in terms of music. Final Fantasy XII wasn't good either, in my opinion. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. I think all the music of Final Fantasies are always very well done and very well thought about, but hey, it'll be interesting. We'll see. So far, I'm not overly excited about the soundtrack of the game, let's say it this way. Alright, that's it for the general presentation items I wanted to talk about. So now, let's go to the gameplay. Alright, let's get down to the gameplay. So the gameplay in this game is actually very interesting. I think that is definitely an action RPG. It is not anymore an RPG for me. It plays like Final Fantasy XV, it plays like Crisis Core, it plays like Kingdom Hearts in a way, from a battle standpoint. In general, you can attack with square and you can do melee attacks, so you can just do some combos. You can use R1 to dodge, you can use triangle to use some magic, and there will be something new that they don't really promote that much on the demo yet, but it seems that you have a system of icon where you can switch between icons, so you have different style of attack. So for example, the Phoenix icon allow you to do fire, but if you take the Garuda icon, it will allow you to do tornadoes, and if you take the Titan, it's more earth-based kind of skills. So there will be some difference there that you can see mostly in a certain part of the demo that we're going to discuss during the playability section. Overall, you will also see that in order to use the inventory, you have to use up, down, and right. So for example, you can put some potion up, so like that you can use up in order to use a potion. When I think about it, it's pretty much like Crisis Core. There's a lot of things that look similar to Crisis Core, which for me, Crisis Core is a good game, so I kind of appreciate the gameplay. Although here, the differences I think will be on the iconic skills, where you can buff or debuff enemies or buff your characters with attack, magic, defense. You can see it a little bit more on iconic challenge, like I said, because for example, when you have Titan, you can use a special defense, a guard, that could be better than the normal guarding that you have with R1. And by the way, with R1 it's not necessarily guarding, it's dodging. You can do a precision dodge and all those kind of stuff. So there is some timing features in the battle system here too, so I'm not going to do into a lot of details, but you could technically protect yourself at the exact right time that somebody is attacking, so like that you can then counter-attack, and that is pretty cool. When it comes to the items in this game, I was surprised, but it's limited. The inventory is limited, so for example, you cannot have more than 4 potions in this demo. When you go beyond 4 potions, it will automatically use the potion that has been taken from the field. Another thing that is interesting too, that you may have noticed when you play the game, is that at the beginning of the game it asks you, do you want a story-based or battle-based difficulty option? And that is interesting for me. I prefer to be story-based because for me I prefer the story because it's an RPG after all. But you could make sure that the game is harder for you if you want to play it more for the fighting. You will see that when you go into the menu, there's a lot of things that you can see. Number one, there's a section named Abilities. It doesn't show straight off the bat on the demo, you have to wait up until you still win to see it. And what's interesting with that is that you can basically upgrade some of your attacks, but you can also learn something completely new. So for example, you have fire as an attack. You could technically upgrade the fire attack to master it at a higher level. Or what you can do is to just grab a completely new ability that would allow you to add on your sword fire elements and so forth. And some of those will require you to actually use certain buttons. So for instance, you can now jump in this game. So you could technically do jump and then press square and it will do a knockdown, which is one ability that you can unlock from the ability screen. There is some special abilities coming from the icon as well that you can also master and all of that. The surprising things for is that ability system is an ability tree system like most of the current games, including Final Fantasy that does a lot of that nowadays. But here, you can actually completely reset it and start it all over again. It's very different from any other single games that I know about, because once you generally pick up an ability, it's locked and you cannot go back. Apparently in this game you can, in Final Fantasy XVI, from what the demo says. So think about that. That could be a great thing for you to completely redo your characters the way that you like, basically. Also, when you look at the system of equipment in this game, you will see that there's only 6 items that you can wear on your character. A weapon, some sort of arms protection, gloves protection, there's 2 of those, and then there's 3 accessories. So you could depend on all of that to actually make your character better. I think there's like 6 to 7 type of status on your character. So what I mean by that is that you have strength, you have staggering, because yes, staggering is coming back in this game. You could stagger an enemy. You have a in-between level of stagger as well compared to other games. So for example, on Final Fantasy XIII and Final Fantasy XV, you can stagger the enemy, and I think you can just stagger like this only one level of staggering. Here there's more like 2 levels of staggering, with the first one not being staggered, but really the second one really being staggered, and then the characters is just the enemies that you have will just do nothing up until the staggering is done. There is also some limit break in this game, but the limit break does not show on the beginning of at the beginning of the demo. You have to play on the iconic challenge to see that. But I'm not gonna go into too much details there because maybe it's spoilery area, so I'll be careful about that. And yes, you can level up in this game. There's a level up system. I did not really understand how it works, if it depends on enemies that you fight or not. It looks like it, but since there's so few enemies in this demo, it's hard to tell. Anyway, you can also earn gears from enemies and also some other items, because there's a lot of items that seems to be concoction style of items that you can cook and stuff like that, but they don't give you really that much details about that in this demo, so we'll have to see on the final game. The enemies are directly visible on screen. There's no random encounter, or at least from the demo itself, it doesn't look like there will be random encounters. And unfortunately, the big thing that I didn't like is that Clive is the only playable character on the whole demo. Well, technically speaking, there is a little bit of a demo where you play with a different character, but I don't want to spoil that out too much. And there's also the Dominion fights that you have at the beginning of the demo, which is not necessarily like playing with your character. But all of the characters so far are controlled by artificial intelligence. So you will see that once you have some characters with you, they just help you, but they're just there to help you. That's it. Like, you cannot control them, unfortunately. One little thing that I really liked, that I found funny and interesting, is that you have in the menu all the available characters that are with you, not playable because you cannot play except Clive, like I told earlier. You can actually see them in kind of like a 2D battle style sprite from Final Fantasy IV. And I found that super cute. I found that super cute. So now let's talk about the world map. So unfortunately, there is a world map, but it is a world map that you can just press things. You do not visit areas by just going from one place to another by yourself, at least not on this demo. And that is too bad. I don't like this kind of map where you just have like some little thing that say, oh, go here, go there, go there, go there. I always felt that it would have been better to have something that is 100% available to you. But I can understand how hard it is to do that in current generation era, right? So yeah. But talking about maps, let's talk about maps in the dungeons per se. And in this case, they actually have no map in dungeons. There's no map. So remember on Final Fantasy XV or Final Fantasy VII Remake, you have a map on the top right to help you, and then you can open a real map on the menu. Unless I missed it out completely, I did not see any map in this game. Not at all. So you have to find everything by yourself. And it's actually better because the game is super linear so far. Like the dungeons in the game were very linear. So I don't think they're very special, and maybe that's why they decided to not put any map. But I would say that when you play the iconic challenge, you can see a little bit of a better dungeon where there's multiple places that you can go to. So maybe a map would be great in those use cases, but anyway, it's interesting. So now talking about dungeons, There are items in this game, so like I said earlier, you can have items, and it's very interesting how they show that on dungeons. On the normal demo, if you do not play the iconic challenge, it's just a bunch of bluish flickers, and you go to them, and it will automatically pick the item. Which I think is good, because remember Final Fantasy XV where you had to press X, but X is also a jump, so sometimes the character just jumped instead of picking up stuff. Well, you don't have that problem anymore with the systems that they did here. Well, technically you don't, because when you play the iconic challenge, you will see that sometimes there are treasures in boxes or in chests, right? There's not that many, but there were some. So it seems that treasures will still be available in chests, which is good, because, you know, it's a Final Fantasy game after all. And that is about it about the gameplay. I wanted to give you an idea about the gameplay. So for me, the gameplay is kind of so far. I'm not sure that I liked the very action RPG and one character only playable system. So my hope is that this will be different in the final game, that you can see that you can play more than just one character and so forth. So now let's go to the story. Let's talk a little bit about the story. I'm gonna try to avoid spoilers so that you can enjoy playing the demo by yourself. When it comes to Final Fantasy XVI story, I would say this. It is pretty much a Game of Thrones style of story. Yes, you heard me right. It's a lot of things related to kingdoms and empires fighting against each other. It's a medieval era kind of game, and you can see that there's betrayals going on. So yes, pretty much Game of Thrones. I was actually surprised by 2 scenes in this game where I was like, oh, that's not really what Final Fantasy used to do. So there's 2 to 3 scenes like that. There's another scene where it's gorier than usual Final Fantasy, but I would expect that to be part of Final Fantasy still. But yeah, there were 2 scenes I was like, very interesting, very interesting. It's one of them is with Benedicta and the other one is with the Queen, which I'm probably gonna show you a little bit of gameplay behind the scene here. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about how the story is shown on this demo. Well, it starts with some foreshadowing of events that we don't understand yet. It gives ideas about what's a dominant, what's a Necon, the fight between the various kingdoms. You kind of understand that the Iron Blood seems to be a big problem for everyone, and that there's something named the Blight. And the Blight is interesting because for me the Blight definitely reminded me of a Star Scourge on Final Fantasy XV. Remember when, there's all those beasts, all those monsters coming out at night from the Star Scourge? Here it seems to be very similar. It seems to be like, this darkness that's coming up with beastmen like the goblins and stuff like that. And there's even a Mother Crystal in this game. So that's good because crystals are a general important part of Final Fantasy in the past. So it's good to still have crystals coming back here, but it's interesting that in this case, using the crystal will help against the darkness, which, you know, Final Fantasy XV did that too. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about the main character, or at least the one that we believe is the main character, which is Clive Rosfield from the Duchy of Rosaria. So, the beginning of the game shows you somebody named Wyvern, which definitely is Clive, and we know that because of the iconic challenge anyway, because then he will be named Clive over there. But what's interesting is that that beginning will foreshadow, or will go back into the past, sorry. It will go back into the past, and then you will discover our main character, Clive Rosefield from the Duchy of Rosaria. He has a brother named Joshua, which we heard tons of things about Joshua because of all those trailers, right? I didn't watch all the trailers, by the way, because I didn't want to know more about the story up until I play the real game. But he has a brother, Joshua, who is actually kind of sick and healed, but he's blessed by being a dominant. And a dominant in Final Fantasy XVI lore is basically somebody that can call out an icon and become an icon. And for Joshua, the icon is Phoenix, which apparently should be the only fire icon existing. But you discover in this demo that it's not necessarily the case, because there's a second icon showing up with fire powers. And at the end of the day, everything that is kind of promoted from the story here is pretty much the plot twist and kind of like the betrayal and all those kind of things. Characters that seems to be connected to each other. So on the iconic challenge, for example, you can see the connection between Sid and Benedicta. So that's interesting, in my opinion. But unfortunately, we don't get enough of that. The reality is that on this demo, the only thing that you really get is a little bit more of background about Clive and Joshua, but that's about it. And that's the thing that was promoted maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago through trailers. So it's too bad, but that makes me excited to see more. I think that Clive's story seems to be okay to me. Not necessarily that original, but seems to be okay. So I'm very excited to see what they do with characters like Jill, because unfortunately Jill was not really talked about at all. We just know that she's there, but we don't even know who is she. I was thinking, is she a sister to Joshua and Clive? But I don't think it is. And yeah, there's one thing on the gameplay that I didn't talk about, which is when you press on the part on the PlayStation 5 DualSense where there is some kind of, and you have that on PlayStation 4, when there is some kind of like a screen, some kind of little screen, if you press on that, sometime you can actually get some extra active lore, which in this case probably would have talked about Jill, that I didn't check because I don't like being disrupted on my cutscenes. We shouldn't have a system where there's a journal or something like that that gives you the lore. I think the lore should be given to you by the cutscenes themselves. And I hope that they didn't do that mistake on Final Fantasy XVI again, because they did that mistake on Final Fantasy XIII and they did that mistake on Final Fantasy XV in my opinion. So please don't do that on Final Fantasy XVI, please, please, please. Anyway, a little disappointment on my side is related to that. So that's all I can tell really about the story, because there's not that much. I think that gives enough for you to get started and understand particularly the main character that is Clive. So now, let's talk about playability, which is the last part of this video. Alright, now from the playability standpoint, which is mostly the length, what I would say is that the demo actually has 2 parts, and you need to unlock the second part after you finish the first one, which, to be honest, I think is kind of a mistake. And why is that? Is because the first part is very linear. You have only 2 dungeons on the first part, but those 2 dungeons are very short and very fast to be done, and also especially on the first dungeon, because that's the one that really has a lot of non-story kind of ways to be visited, it's just so linear. It's very, very linear, and I'm so sad that the game did not try to do something a little bit more semi-linear like older Final Fantasy does, because the reality is that Final Fantasy never was something that I would consider open world, let's say, well, apart from Final Fantasy XV. but I'm just feeling so underwhelmed by the extreme linearity of those dungeons. It's like you move ahead, you can look a little bit on the left and right, and then you move ahead, you cannot go back, so you have to move ahead, and then you have to move ahead. It looks like Final Fantasy XIII. Maybe a bit better than Final Fantasy XIII because at least you do not have a map, but still. I wish that they showed, for example, really like villages or stuff that you can just go around and talk to people, or like buying stuff in a shop or things like that, things that are really from an RPG and things that used to make Final Fantasies, right? But right now, unfortunately, it's not like that. It is not like that on the second part either, but at least I would say that the second part is still linear, but the dungeon has multiple paths you can go around. And I think that the second part, which you cannot save at all on that second part compared to the first one, where you can save any time that you would like and that you would want, which is great and weird because a Final Fantasy where you can save anywhere is kind of weird. I don't remember what they did on Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake, now that I'm talking about that. But anyway, I think in Final Fantasy VII Remake there were like some save points, right? I need to check that back. But in this case, you can save anywhere, and that was interesting to me. And when I think about that, the second part does not allow you to save at all, so you have to finish it in one go, which is not too short of a one go, so you have to be careful about that, just so you know, because I really had to hurry up at the end with the last boss, and I was like, oh my god, I hope I can finish that fast enough. But overall, I actually like the second part better than the first part when it comes to gameplay. For sure, because at least you can see more diversity and you can actually get a little bit more about the game. I would say that the brightness of the game is very low, so I have to change that eventually, because that second dungeon I could barely see where I was going because it was so dark. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say about playability here, is that I do feel that the demo is fair. In general, it's fair. I think I probably finished it about 3 hours to 4 hours on my side, although I'm slow and I also take a lot of pictures, and I'm trying to stop my character to take some pictures and trying to go back on stuff to see if I'm missing something. So I would say that the demo is not too long, but it's not too short either. I think it gives you a good idea of the beginning of the game at least. But that worries me, because I'm thinking that, you know, they give you a little bit of leeway to see more, but the seeing more does not show you things that are more open world and all that, and it looks very linear, and you can play only with one character, which is Clive, and you can never go like with other characters. So I'm a little bit worried about those parts. But anywho, let's talk about that on my conclusion, shall we? Let's conclude this video and my hot take about Final Fantasy XVI demo. Overall, I felt the demo provides some insight on the game style and the presentation, and I appreciate that. I think it's good to start from the beginning of the game and then offer something that's still at the beginning of the game but not too far off, so like that it doesn't give you too much away from the story. But I'll say this, I am a bit concerned about how linear that demo was. I'm worried that the game so far is relying on cutscenes, then dungeon, then boss, then cutscene, then dungeon, then boss. And I'm hoping that they're not going to do the same mistake than Final Fantasy XIII. I'm really hoping that they're going to do something a little bit more open world, a little bit more special, where you can actually remember about what was the feeling of a Final Fantasy, which is, okay, you can still go ahead on the story, but you can still do a lot of other stuff around before you go ahead. And right now I don't know if that is there. I know that Final Fantasy XV actually did that maybe a bit too much, like really killing the story to give you more like the option of an open world, so maybe they're trying to be in between here. But when you think about it, Final Fantasy XIV is an online game, so we have to do things that are pretty big and with a lot of things to do. Well, maybe too many things to do and not enough of a story, right? So maybe they try to balance that here. But unfortunately, this demo does not give you the feeling about how the variety, the diversity of the game. I don't feel that demo gives you that, and that worries me a bit because I really hope that there will be variety in the game. I think that when you think about the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo, these two did not give you as much of the information, but still you were able to play with multiple characters, and then you were able to see the system of the battle system a little bit more because it gives you enough clues about how it works. And I felt that the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo gave you more insights about the game than what this demo is giving you. So we'll see. I'm still pretty sure that the game will be good. I'm not saying that it's not going to be good, but I'm a little bit underwhelmed by the linearity so far that I saw here. Also, the worst thing is that it's also more an action game than it is an RPG so far. So if we have something extremely linear, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I hope that when we have a final game, there will be more like a balance of those two aspects of the game. Because after all, Final Fantasy is an RPG. It's an RPG franchise. So my hope is that we're going to make sure that it's still an RPG in its essence and not an action game. So that's it. That's my hot take about Final Fantasy XVI demo. I hope that you can play the demo yourself, but if you don't, I did a whole playthrough of the demo with no commentaries that is available on my other channel, Video Game Heaven, which I will share with you as a link, or maybe it will pop up somewhere on the screen. Who knows? Alright, thank you so much everybody for watching Toss a Show. I hope it gave you a good idea of Final Fantasy XVI demo and that you liked the show. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave it in the demo and in the video below, and talk to all of you soon. Toss out everyone, bye bye.